Dr. Andrea Bliss is the psychologist for the MAPS OCD clinic at the Alberta Children's Hospital and the founder and owner of the Child Forward Centre. She specializes in the assessment and treatment of anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, and related disorders in children and youth. She's a clinical associate in the Department of Psychology at the University of Calgary and provides workshops, training, and supervision for students and other professionals on the assessment and treatment of OCD within the family context. And I hand it over to you, Dr. Bliss.
Okay, thank you for that, Julian. Good morning, everyone. I am thrilled to be here with you this morning and to be a part of this webinar series today, talking about how to include family in pediatric OCD treatment. And now I'm going to have trouble moving the slides. There we go. Julian, can you let me know if you can just see the slides? Just want to make sure I know what's coming up on the screen.
Yes, I can see the importance of including family.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, I want to start by just talking about why is it even important to include family in your process? Simply, youth are embedded in a family context. And so we know that including family is typically really key to success in treatment. They're involved in even the very practical aspects, such as booking the appointments and bringing the children in. But what I want to talk about today is how to make them really active participants in your treatment process. We know that OCD causes usually the most disruptions at home and for different family members. It often affects their daily functioning. So for example, if there's a child spending a lot of time in the bathroom each morning, that can make other family members late for school and for work. If they're having a hard time completing chores because of OCD, then other family members naturally kind of pick up the slack. And we know that a lot of family members are reporting high levels of personal distress. This is for various reasons. They might not know or understand what's happening for that child with OCD. They might find the symptoms frustrating and confusing. Parents often worry about their child's future. They've reached a point where they're not sure where to set limits on behavior. They're not sure what is OCD and what is not. They often report that they're kind of walking on eggshells by the time they meet you. And we know also that there are frequently high levels of conflict and blame and hostility in otherwise very loving families. So we know that OCD impacts family relationships in multiple ways. So we know that OCD impacts the home environment. We also know that the home environment impacts treatment success. So when I was getting ready for this presentation, I started to list all the different ways that we could include family in treatment. And the list went on and on. And I think that there's lots of opportunity to include family members from the very beginning in your assessment process all the way to the end when you're thinking about treatment termination. I won't get to talk about all of this today in detail. I want to focus on the aspects that are really specific to OCD treatment. So for example, I won't have the opportunity to talk about general kind of family therapy, looking at problem solving and communication skills. Some of this has also been covered in other webinars. So psychoeducation, I think that's important for any family that we work with, that family members are included in that process so that they really understand OCD for this child, the treatment rationale, and all along the way, we want to make sure that parents in particular, they understand why you might be suggesting certain ERPs for their child and make sure we have their buy-in and there's no surprises. Other things, so psychoeducation I think is important for all. Some of these things I think we kind of pick and choose from depending on the family's unique profile. Some of this I will also be talking about in a future webinar. So for example, advocating for the child in the school setting. So I think that good treatment and a good treatment plan always starts with a really good assessment, and that's no different for including family members in the treatment process. So I think that assessment is really much more than just determining, is there OCD or is there not? Is there comorbidity? Is there not? So it's not just about the diagnosis. It is putting a bunch of puzzle pieces together, getting multiple perspectives, and kind of deciding, where do we go from here? How do we tackle all of these things, and in what order? So I've included here how we can include family members in looking more about the child's symptoms, but also their own symptoms and their own kind of profiles and what they're coming into treatment with, and the general family functioning. All of these factors are going to impact your treatment plan. So this is not an exhaustive list, but I often want to know other family members, parents in particular, what is their perspective on the child's OCD symptoms? So I've included a couple of great measures there where we can see, what do they see? How does that compare to what the child is reporting? So there's the CY box scale or the TOX scale. I've also highlighted that we can definitely include family members in our CY box clinical interview. So this is a wonderful opportunity to really be asking everybody their perspectives on various obsessions and various compulsions. Often the child and the parent don't report the same thing, so it's our job to put those things together. There's a specific question on there about accommodations, about how the family might have been kind of pulled into OCD cycle. But we can also ask about it all along the way and understand how family might be involved throughout various obsessions the child experiences, through different compulsions that they have to do. Of course, we also want family perspective on just other things that might be happening for this child, whether it's challenging behavior directly related to OCD, or just getting that larger context of comorbidity and other things, strengths included. We want to know about family members themselves. So we know there's a genetic component of OCD, so it's important to assess for OCD and other mental health issues in other family members. We want to know all of their beliefs about OCD, about mental health in general, about treatment, because this could really impact how things go. If they're not buying into what you're asking your child to do, then it's unlikely that there's going to be between session work going on. So something that we would address head on. We want to know about OCD's impact on the family, because we know that that is likely. So we can ask about, how it impacts the day-to-day functioning of various family members. We can ask them directly about accommodations they might be engaging in to support their child. We also want to know about their attitudes and beliefs about OCD. So if, for example, there is a lot of hostility or blaming happening, which is common, then again, that's information for us to know we might need to spend more time on the psychoeducation piece and make sure that we really externalize OCD and help others understand what's happening for the child. We also want to know about overall family functioning. Again, helping families to sort out what is OCD, what is not. We want to get, as much as we can, kind of a baseline. Where was this family at before OCD kind of barged in on their family life? Were there difficulties with communication or setting limits or problem solving? If so, maybe we need to address that first, and make sure that parents feel really confident and comfortable setting limits and communicating calmly with their child before they jump into supporting them with ERPs and other OCD work. A helpful tool in that can just be doing a functional assessment of any concerns that come up. So if they're talking about a challenging behavior and they're not sure if that's OCD or not, we want to sort out what is happening before that behavior happens. What are all the details leading up to that? Are there obvious obsessional triggers or not? What happens after? Is that behavior the child's engaging in, is it actually a compulsion? Is there some relief there? Does it serve a purpose? So we're always wanting to know what is the function of various behaviors. And we definitely want to ask about family strengths as well. So, what's going well? What did you do when the family was going well? How did we get back there? Now we're ready to go to the next slide. So I'm going to start by talking about, just in general, with parents, what is their role in treatment? What do we want to see from them? What do we want to tell them from the very beginning they're going to be doing in their work with you? So first of all, we want to make sure that they're always included in treatment, ideally in every session. And we want them to play a really active role. So any expectations they might have about dropping their child off for treatment, going for a coffee, picking them up at the end of the hour, we need to dispel that right away. And there's lots of active roles that they can play. So it could be managing the reward system, being involved in their child's ERPs, limiting accommodations, and so on. So we'll talk about different options for them. We want everyone to have a role. We know that the child kind of takes the lead and responsibility in treatment a lot of the time. As therapists, we are coaches. We teach them skills, we give them information, we model different skills for them. Parents, they need to take on more of a supportive kind of cheerleader role in their child's efforts. So we need them to demonstrate confidence that their child's got it, kind of foster their independence so that they have these skills for the rest of their life, and to be able to recognize progress and report that to their child. We also might need them to report some observations to us. So we don't want to put parents in a position where they feel like they need to monitor things and end up in this kind of nagging role for their child. So did you do your ERPs? Are you doing enough? Did you really put the effort in? That's not going to be beneficial for their relationship or probably for treatment progress. So if there are issues, we want to encourage parents to just note it and bring it to the next therapy session so that we can sort out a plan together. We might also be asking parents to help get rid of some barriers to treatment success. So if, for example, the child has a number of extracurricular activities and they don't have time for ERPs, then maybe we need to think about what is the priority and how do we schedule those things in. So we want parents to be a part of that process. We want to support parents in, and all family members, in externalizing OCD. So we're going to teach them how to use language that's going to show the child this is kind of us rallying around you. This is us against OCD. So they can use language like, I'm mad OCD is making this so hard right now, but I know we can beat OCD together, rather than, oh, you always make us late for work, right? So we want to get away from that blaming and that frustration that we often see at the beginning of treatment. And finally, we want to teach parents and support them in modeling distress tolerance. We are asking their kids to do really hard things. We're asking them to be uncomfortable on purpose and challenge themselves. So we need parents to show their child, you've got this and I've got you. So, however they need to do that, we need them to be there. And to show them, even if you're a bit uncomfortable, it's okay. You'll come out the other side. Anxiety isn't going to hurt you or kill you. It's uncomfortable, but we can get through to the other side together. The opposite of that would be modeling distress or even disgust when you're creating ERP plans or when the child is going in to do their ERP or during their ERP. So if parents are kind of going, okay, you're going to do that, okay, then they're not setting their child up for success. Or they might rescue during an ERP. So they might jump in and say, essentially, this is too hard for you. You can't handle this. I'm going to accommodate, or we're going to stop this ERP prematurely. And that's obviously going to impact treatment success. Okay. So when you're working with the child, you're probably starting to set up a reward system. I would definitely recommend that. And I think we need to include family in that process as well. So I think I won't get into too much information about this because there's lots I want to cover today. But in addition to parents playing that kind of cheerleader supportive role with lots of praise, we can also include parents in this and help them to acknowledge the hard work that ERPs are and the hard work that their child is doing. Rewards are also about changing that association. So, facing your OCD fears is hard, it's uncomfortable, it's miserable, I can't do it. to, actually I can do it, and there's something to sweeten the pot, or there's something to look forward to at the end of it. And of course, we do reward systems because it increases motivation. We don't ever want to be punishing children for engaging in rituals. Instead, we are really, and this goes with any kind of anxiety or OCD treatment, we want to meet kids where they're at. We want to set goals that are going to set them up for success, kind of work at things one step at a time, and reward them and praise them for doing really brave things. I tend to prioritize the reward system at the beginning of treatment. Even for kids who are saying, I don't need that, I just want to beat OCD. At the very least, it is putting on the table, we need to praise you and acknowledge the hard work that you're doing. We want to make sure that parents are rewarding effort, not getting to a SUDS rating or an anxiety rating of 0. So when we start doing that, kids start going, okay, I'm at a 4, I'm at a 3, I'm at a 2, at a 1, a 0, I'm done. So it can end ERPs prematurely. And it can also mean that we run up that hierarchy too quickly when we're doing ERPs, because we don't realize how difficult that still is for the child. So reward effort, not lower distress. And we know that anxiety doesn't always come down right away, or necessarily during an ERP. Rewards ideally are not related to OCD symptoms. So for example, there might be a child who washes their hands a lot and they use a lot of soap, and they might plead, it's going to be really motivating if I just get some extra soap. While that might be rewarding, it's also feeding into OCD, so we'd want to stay away from that. Or for a child who has compulsions involving doing a lot of research and trying to figure things out, giving them extra screen time, some bonus screen time, could result in them having just that much more access to the internet, and again, be feeding into their OCD. So we want to be really careful about what we use as rewards. I usually recommend using charts to track this. These can be really simple, and they can also be fun. So I have a really simple one there that teens might like, where they can just write, here's my exposure plan, here's my response prevention plan, and then we can put the reward right on that sheet. So every time you do the ERP or make an attempt, you get a check mark, and then the reward is spelled out. This can be a quick way for parents to check in about how things are going without getting into debates and back and forths about if they're doing enough. It's an easy way for us to bring it back into treatment and make sure things are happening, but also that parents are accountable for having those rewards there. This is a puzzle piece that I made. So this little girl wanted to work for sparkly slime, because why wouldn't you? And so I believe we just put the ERP goal on the back of each puzzle piece. Each time she made an attempt, she got another puzzle piece. When she put all the puzzle pieces together, she got the reward. So it's just a nice visual on what she was working for, and it's a bit fun. So I will leave rewards at that. So you've got a reward system in place. Probably makes sense to start ERPs with the child in treatment. So I wanted to talk today about how this is such a great opportunity to include parents in that ERP process. This is our chance to build parents' confidence and comfort level with supporting their child at home. So I want to include them when it makes sense and show them how we set things up, how we work through the ERPs, and even what do we do after, and what language do I use throughout that whole process. So let's say, for example, working with a child who has contamination fears, and we're setting up a goal around exposure to a doorknob in the office. So I want the parent to know how we kind of decide what we're going to do. So we've decided on doorknobs, but is there a difference between the doorknob to my office, the doorknob to the bathroom, to the main therapy room where lots of people are touching it? So let's figure that out. Show the parent that this is a collaborative process with the child, and we decide together what to do. We also need to decide even how we are approaching that and what we're doing specifically with that doorknob. So is rubbing your hand all over it too big of an exposure? Can we do a fingertip? Can, if that's too hard, can we use a Kleenex to touch that doorknob and then touch our hand? If that's too big of a step, can we take a Kleenex, touch that doorknob, touch another Kleenex, and let that Kleenex touch your hand? Or do we need 20 Kleenex steps in between? So we want to model for them, there's almost always a smaller step we can take. And the more parents feel equipped to create a hierarchy and meet their child where they're at, the better off everyone is going to be. So we want them to know how we set that up, how we bring the feared outcome right there in front of us when we're doing the ERPs, which I believe Dr. Sapp talked about. So that idea of really leaning into the thoughts and the feared outcome, the feelings that come with exposures. I want to show parents how we prepare for this and how we, the language I use, just walking over to that doorknob. So if the child is approaching the doorknob, like this, and they look uncomfortable, then I'm going to stop them and I'm going to say, let's put our game face on. Let's really do this. I'll get the parents to put their game face on, kind of make it fun. And as we approach it, I'm not going to be probably asking, how anxious are you? How bad is this? I'm going to be using language like, how willing are you to do this next step? I'm going to model distress tolerance, like I was talking about. And as we're doing the exposure, not only am I talking about the feared outcome and the thoughts that are popping up, I'm going to be kind of looking at the child with amazement and curiosity. So I'm going to be asking, how are you doing this? Wow, OCD said you couldn't do it. Don't do it. And here you are, you're doing it. What does this say about you? What does this say about OCD? And the language I would use against, or not against, but during the exposure. So, oh, this is just OCD, nothing we need to do. That's just OCD doing its thing. Modeling for parents how to externalize that process as well. And afterwards, I want parents to be checking in at home and creating that narrative that's going to be helpful for the child to get the most out of ERPs, to learn from it. So OCD said this, did that really happen? Are you still standing? Do you think we're going to feel like this a week later or a month later? I also want to show parents what I'm not doing. So I'm not engaging with OCD and trying to beat it with logic. I'm not using distractions. So we're not talking about the weekend or Halloween. We are leaning in. And I'm not providing safety cues. So I'm not, for example, saying, oh, well, this is probably a good one because we clean the hospital all the time, or whatever the case is. Answering reassurance-seeking questions during the ERP. Okay, so that's how parents can be involved in the child's ERP, but we also know that family members are often intimately involved in the child's symptoms. So we know that at least 90% of family members accommodate OCD. This is occurring on almost a daily basis for most. And so I have up there the OCD cycle that you would have seen in this webinar series already. And I wanted to show how family accommodations kind of roll into this cycle. So we see, that kids get sticky thoughts, unwanted thoughts, they feel anxious or uncomfortable. OCD says, I have a solution for you, just do a compulsion. You're going to feel so much better. Accommodations play that same kind of role. So just do a compulsion or just get parents to do X. You're going to feel so much better when they do. It makes a lot of sense. However, we know that the next time a trigger comes up, OCD has learned if that family member just does this, you're going to feel a lot better. Usually OCD wants more and more of that behavior to get that same relief, and you're just stuck going around and around with that. These are really all efforts to minimize the impact of OCD on their child, but also on their whole family, help the whole day kind of move on. And often these accommodations are really subtle to start. They're kind of seen as part of normative routines. Most kids have a bedtime routine, and that is true. But, again, over time, this becomes repetitive, it becomes too much, it becomes rigid or excessive. And when we see parents, often they feel like it's out of their control. And they might see that, but be at a point where they're not sure even what to do about it and feel very trapped. So we want to talk about that with parents. We want them to understand what is happening and how OCD has kind of pulled them into that cycle. And of course, we want to start to tackle this in treatment because accommodations interfere directly with the exposure-based treatment that we're trying to do. It's showing the child that actually you can't handle that fear and anxiety and discomfort without this thing in place. The child never gets to learn if they just ride it out without doing a compulsion or without having that accommodation, that actually anxiety will come down naturally on its own. Okay. So we see there, I think I've already talked about this, but it kind of serves three main functions for children. And so not only do we want to define what this is for families, but we want to stress for them, this is not about blame. This is completely understandable behavior. I understand how you got to this point. And also that there's a lot of hope to pull them out of that cycle and make sure that they're accommodating less and less. It's another opportunity to really externalize OCD. So I often call them OCDs rules. How can we break an OCD rule together? So again, rallying around the child, and I guess against OCD and OCD's rules. So we're going to be talking about setting limits on these accommodations and how to do that. Let's first just talk about the different type of accommodations that are out there so that you can be talking about them with parents and understand all the things that might be there at play. Okay, so one is just facilitating rituals. So often parents are, supplying what the child needs to get through their day, whether it's extra soap or wipes or hand sanitizer. They might be facilitating avoidance. So maybe the child doesn't want to open the fridge door because they know they'll get stuck opening and closing it repetitively. If a family member just opens it for them, everyone can move on without the child having to engage in that ritual. They might provide reassurance. So OCD often has lots of questions and the parent just needs to say, yes, it's clean, you won't get sick. Maybe 3 times, maybe 20, maybe just once, but with that certainty. That helps to keep that cycle going. Giving into ritual-related demands. So maybe OCD is demanding that family members change their clothes when they enter the house to keep the outside contaminated world separate from the home, the clean, safe home. Quite common. Excuse me. They could be decreasing the child's daily responsibilities. So again, if the child's not able to do chores, so maybe they can't take the garbage out because touching the garbage is an obsessional trigger for their contamination fears, then you know what? It is easier to just do it myself. Participating in rituals, maybe the child has a checking ritual before bed, and the parent also was part of that, and they need to do a kind of final check around the house and report to the child, yep, all the doors are locked. Refraining from saying or doing things, so just avoiding topics altogether that are going to lead to rituals and a lot of stress in the household. Waiting for the child. So if the child engages in a whole checking or arranging routine before leaving for the day, often family members are waiting at the front door or waiting in the car until the child is finished, whether they're late for work or not. Modifying the family routine. So maybe this family does laundry on Saturdays and everyone's laundry is kind of piled in together and that's how they do it. OCD instead wants laundry to be separated and done every day. And family does that because it makes the whole week go smoother and everyone feels more comfortable. So those are some examples. We'll go through some examples about how to limit them. But let's just talk generally about how to do that. So it's best to kind of target this by doing it one step at a time, just like with ERPs. So we might look at what is happening most often. That gives lots of opportunity to practice setting that limit around the accommodation. You can get some traction and momentum with that, so that can be a good way to start. You might decide to start with something that just is a significant problem. So family is often very motivated to work on these ones. They want to get part of their lives back. And then just in general, I would ask, what do you want to work on? What is motivating for you? Okay. So really, just as kids are creating this ERP fear hierarchy or fear ladder, we're going to be asking parents to create a hierarchy around how they're going to set limits on accommodations. And just like with ERPs, we want to start small. We want to take it one step at a time and not move up the hierarchy too quickly. So we do one step a number of times. When that becomes easy, that's our cue. Yep, we're ready to go to the next step. We want to really let success breed success. Whenever possible, we want to make this a collaborative process and include the child in the plan. So maybe you have the child, thinking about a few accommodation limits that could be done and creating their own hierarchy while parents are creating theirs. Then we can put it together. Is there overlap? Is there agreement about what's going to make sense? This would be ideal. We might even just present a couple of ideas to the child and they can decide which one they want to do. But this isn't always how it goes. It's not always that smooth. A lot of the times the family needs to keep moving forward with things. So in that case, even if the child doesn't have buy-in, I'd say it's important for them to know what is going to be happening. We want to avoid surprises whenever possible. When parents are approaching their child around a plan that they've made, then we want to make sure they're really emphasizing what their plan is, what they're going to be doing differently. It's not about them telling the child what they're going to have to start doing differently. We can't make anyone else do anything. So this is about what parents are doing. So they might say, I will be leaving for work on time at 7 a.m., not you need to get ready faster and you need to be ready for 7 a.m. Or we're talking about limiting reassurance seeking. Maybe they're going to say to their child, I will be writing down my response to OCD's question rather than saying it out loud to OCD. As always, this is a chance to externalize and reframe things. So how parents respond to OCD requests can make a big difference. So maybe I know OCD wants me to wash my hands, but I'm here to support you and not OCD anymore. So I'm going to, and then whatever the plan is, I'm going to be waiting 10 minutes before washing. And then again, that reward system, we want to reward that child for coping with that change. They don't have to like it. Doesn't have to be easy. They don't have to embrace it, but just to cope with what the parent is doing. A big note here is that we need to prepare parents for what it is we're asking them to do. And I think we really need to appreciate this is not an easy thing. We need them to know that there's going to be a chance that their child is going to be emotional. There might even be a physical response from the child when we're setting limits on accommodations. Parents need to be prepared for that, to make sure that they see it through, to ensure success. So we need a plan in place around that. Could they do this on a Saturday when the other parent is there for support and even for safety potentially? Or do we need to invite other family members in and make sure everyone knows what they need to do or should do? We need to prepare parents that when they do this, often behavior gets worse before it gets better. If they know that, then again, they're more likely to remain consistent with the plan. We also need to potentially have an emergency plan in place. Is it possible that their child is going to get violent or self-harm or even threat or make self-harm kind of comments? If so, or I think, this is unpredictable. So I think just having that plan in place is going to be important. Do they call 911? Do they go to the emergency department? Do they call the distress line? Again, is there family who's going to be there that can support with that? So we need to know what that plan is. We need parents to see that, but also kind of explore how they're feeling about having that plan. Most parents have a lot of guilt around their crisis plan. They don't want to call the police. There's a lot of shame involved. What will the neighbors hear and see? So again, we need to address that with them head on so that they can follow through. Basically, we don't want to leave parents hanging. We don't want to say, yep, go set that limit. Let me know how it goes. I hope it goes well. I'll see you next week. We need to make sure everything is in place. Part of that is, again, stressing consistency. So we need them to know every failed attempt means that you have lost a little bit of credibility, but you also have that much more work to do. For some parents, we also need to even just have a conversation about their pacing. So some are hesitant to set limits. Others, they want to race up the hierarchy, and we might need to slow them down a little bit and make sure that they are seeing progress, seeing that things get easier before they run on to the next step. Okay, so some examples. So in this case, OCD wants parents to do a number of things. Gather the child's clothes, wash them each night. So this child has contamination fears, but also just doesn't feel right and is down to maybe 1 or 2 outfits. So they need their wardrobe washed each night so it's ready for the next day. This child, or OCD, really wants this laundry folded, put back in a designated area, make sure it hasn't touched anything that has been contaminated. So there are a number of things for us to tease apart here. One, we need the parents to know how they're going to approach this with their child. So I would suggest they approach it a few days in advance of actually implementing the plan. Pick a time when you know the child's going to be at their best, and say, you know, this is what I'm going to be doing. Take a couple of days, think about it. Let me know if you have any questions. We're going to start on Sunday morning, or whatever the case is. Again, make sure there's a plan. Everyone knows what to happen if this is going to be difficult. And then here are some steps that this family could take. We want to change one variable at a time. There's a number of variables in this. So OCD wants laundry washed every day. Could the parents say that they will be now washing laundry every other day? If OCD wants a lot of soap in that cycle, can we switch to a rinse cycle only? OCD wants things done at night so that outfit is there for the next morning. Parents say, I'm going to be washing during the day. They're probably sick of waiting until that load is done in the wash. They can put it in the dryer and go to bed. They can be saying, rather than gathering up all the clothes, I will be washing the clothes that are in this basket, you know, at this time. So it's not about saying to the child, you need to gather everything and get it here. It's saying, I will be washing the clothes that are in this spot. And ultimately, the goal is to be getting back to that family norm. So in this case, let's say it is doing laundry on Saturday with everyone's kind of laundry piled in together. So any one of these steps, we can probably break down into a number of different steps. So even washing that laundry with other family members' laundry. Maybe dad's underwear is more contaminated than mom's shirt that she wore yesterday. Can we start with mom's shirt? Can we work our way, kind of inch our way over to dad's underwear? What am I doing for time? I think I'll just do this one really quickly. So in this case, OCD wants mom in particular to watch Jane get dressed in her bedroom each day. It helps her know that she's done everything correctly. She's good to go. And so mom's presence alone is a safety cue for Jane. And it would be very difficult for mom to just walk away. So we inch our way towards that process. So here's some examples. Perhaps mom, literally inches her way away from Jane, working to the doorway, working to the hallway, still visible, still able to see. If OCD wants mom's undivided attention on that process, can she start working on her phone or reading a book or singing while she's watching Jane? Can we eventually move her out of sight, maybe stay on the same floor of the house, move to another floor? Eventually, mom is going to say, I will be leaving for work on time at 7 o'clock. Again, emphasizing her plan, not what Jane needs to do for that to make sense. This last one, this is about OCD not wanting school and home to cross paths. Basically, there's a clear boundary between home and school. School should not enter the home. So for this child, she does not want anybody talking at the dinner table because that would increase the chance that something about school comes up. That's going to lead to lots of rituals and lots of stress. So could the family start talking at the dinner table, but about nothing school related? Again, you would need every family member on board with something like that. Can they discuss school earlier in the day when the child is at their best? Can the parent and the child eat on the patio or in another room and practice talking about really planned school topics? Can we bring really planned school topics to the table so everyone knows what they can discuss and not discuss? And then inch towards really unplanned conversation where school-related things could come up and the child has to tolerate that uncertainty about where the discussion will go. Okay. I am very much running out of time. I'm trying to decide how to prioritize. I think I want to talk about some things besides reassurance seeking. It's the same kind of idea though, limiting things one step at a time. So managing secondary gains. I'm just going to briefly say, again, parents come in often at a point where they don't know what is OCD and what is not. They feel like they're walking on eggshells, and they also often have lowered expectations about just appropriate behavior, about academic work and where their child should be, about how much household responsibility that child has. And often there's a lot of attention and focus on OCD. So it feels like every conversation is about OCD. A lot of attention is on this one child. So we want to get them back to some sort of norm. We want them to think about how can we focus on other things that that child is good at or interested in. If they're an artist, can we start talking about art a bit more than OCD? If they are spending a lot of time on OCD and really available for OCD, can they start evening out their time with one-on-one time with each sibling? If they've taken a leave from work, how do we get them back to work or at least to other activities so they're not so available for OCD? For example, to reach out to them from school throughout the day. Can we give them new chores? So if they can't load the dishwasher because dishes are contaminated, can we get them setting the table instead when the dishes are clean? And this is going to be good for siblings, for everyone involved in the family. Okay. I'm not going to get into this. I just want to say that for many families, having parents involved in their child's ERPs, but also in setting limits on accommodations, that can take you really, really far. For other families, that can be insufficient. And they can find it overwhelming, frustrating, they're juggling many things. And so we might need to address some of these issues head on. So maybe we're recommending parents get their own treatment, that there's marital therapy happening, or we pause and have them in family therapy where they build communication skills and build relationships so that they can do this really challenging OCD work. I think we also need to address family discouragement. So sometimes parents feel like they're working way harder than their child, or they feel like things should be, progressing much faster than they are. In those cases, I might bring up a chart like this and I'll show them, in this first graph, this is where we all want treatment to go. We want it to be that over time, we just see this beautiful linear process where things just keep getting better and better. That's what I want as a therapist. The more realistic trend is this second graph. So we want to still see things overall getting better and better for this child and this family, but we know we're expecting bumps along the road. So we want them to know that those bumps are okay. A bump does not mean a complete relapse. Remind them about the skills and the information that they have now that they didn't have at the start of treatment. So it's just encouraging them, we will get there. And then the last thing I really want to say is just that last point. Sometimes kids aren't ready for treatment, but family members are. And I think as therapists, we have a choice to either say, well, I'm sorry that that's the case, but unless the child is going to buy in and they're going to do ERPs, there's not much I can do. Or we can say, well, then why don't you come in? I think there's lots we can do for you and probably lots we can do for your child indirectly. So I think the latter is my preference. Family members often really benefit from that psychoeducation piece, just understanding what's happening for their child, having that space to explore their own thoughts and frustrations and feelings around that, using that externalizing language, all of those things we were talking about before, that's still going to be important. And I think we need to send them the message that they need to be in it for the long haul, unfortunately. So we know OCD tends to wax and wane over time. And if those family members are healthy and in a good place, and even getting back to their own values, their own important activities, not letting OCD kind of take over their whole family life, then they're going to be better positioned when that timing is better for their child. When those things are in place, we can start talking about setting limits on accommodations. So doing all of those things I just said, understanding what they are, laying them out, making a plan, approaching the child about that. And that's going to indirectly help the child, absolutely. It can also sometimes increase the child's motivation to come in. So I'd rather be in there having my own say about how this is going to go. And that's great. And if not, that's okay too. I think we also need to tell family members that often they are saying things like, just get them on the phone or just get them in once. And they think we have this magic word or phrase that's going to turn everything around and have their child engage in treatment. That's not likely to be the case. So we need them to know that and be prepared for that. Okay. Very briefly, we can always include siblings in treatment. They benefit from psychoeducation and understanding what's happening for their brother or sister. We can have them there as cheerleaders and be there to celebrate, because OCD impacts them too. We might have them involved in ERPs, either to just provide that space for their sibling to do their work, or they might be involved. Maybe the sibling is contaminated themselves. So maybe we have ERPs where they're giving high fives, or they're playing a game and touching the same pieces, or they set up a movie night where they're on the same couch and sharing popcorn. So there's probably lots of ways we can include siblings in that. We might set up their own personal reward system so that it doesn't feel unfair that the child with OCD is not only getting this extra attention, whether it's good or bad, but also their rewards. Everyone's working on something, so we can probably set all the siblings up with things that they're working on and a reward system. And again, give them space to explore what this has been like for them, how it impacts them. And finally, we just want to keep in mind that, or appreciate that, some obsessions and compulsions are really private for kids and teens. And so we need to explore that with them and make sure that they're ready to inform their siblings about all of the details. And we can include family in that whole celebration at the end. We want them to be aware of OCD trends, where we know things can wax and wane over time. So we can have family prepared to jump in if OCD tries to creep back into their house, kind of be looking for signs. So is academic performance declining? Are we seeing hand washing starting to increase again? That can be a really important piece. We don't want them to be hypervigilant or kind of living in fear of OCD returning. So we want to kind of strike a balance with parents about how they do that. That might be looking at, how do they check in as a family? If they've gone to kind of weekly check-ins towards the end of treatment, can we even extend that to monthly check-ins so that it's not all that they talk about, but is still on the table to some extent? Okay, I will leave it at that. I just want to bring your attention to this extra resource. I think Dr. Arnold did a great job of bringing resources into this webinar series in September. So the IOCDF website, for example, that's going to be helpful for parents as well. More locally, we have this consult time in the OCD program at the Alberta Children's Hospital. So therapists can call or email us anytime and set up a consult. So bring your case to us and we can all kind of put our heads together and think about how to include family or how to do ERPs with that child. And that's that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Bliss. I can see we have a couple of questions there already in the chat. Others of you that have questions may want to post them in chat so that Dr. Bliss can answer them. I'm going to launch the second evaluation for you to complete. So we have around about 7 or 8 minutes for any other questions you may have going forward.
Okay, I'm just sorry, I was having a hard time hearing you there, Julian, but I think we're jumping into the questions.
I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yes. No, that's on my end. You don't need to apologize. Okay. So I think the first question there is just about how do families access treatment, which is always a good question. It's not always a straight route. And so this family's decided to go private. So I would say the first step for any family is probably to call Access Mental Health. Anyone can call that line. You'll probably need a referral from your doctor, but it's your opportunity to call in, explain all of your concerns and what you see. If you see OCD symptoms, I'd say put that on the table. And community clinics treat OCD. And then there's the specialized clinics through the MAPS program, and that's actually 2 different sites. So there's Richmond Road Center, and then there's also the Alberta Children's Hospital program. And so they will get you into the next appointment and decide what's going to be most appropriate once they know the details for your family. So I'd say start with Access Mental Health. This person is wondering about coping with OCD and ERP for individuals whose fears and compulsions center around the COVID pandemic. Yeah, it's a really challenging time. I think that the same kind of principles apply here, where we're trying to get back to family norms, and in this case, really our society's norms. So we probably are washing our hands a bit more than usual. I mean, I hope we are, and we're using hand sanitizer. So I'd be asking the family, what does the rest of the family do? What is the norm for your house? How do we inch towards that through ERPs? When we're designing ERPs, we might have to shift things temporarily. So, you know, if someone has contamination fears and we're not in a pandemic, we might be rubbing a Skittle on a doorknob and then eating that Skittle. Once you've ingested it, like, it is what it is. There's no kind of taking that back. I might not recommend that at this point. So I think we just need to be aware of what we're doing. And as always, why are we asking someone to do this? Is it targeting their feared outcome? Is it an obsessional trigger for this child? Yeah, I think that answers that question, but feel free to add more. And I think, oh, could you please speak to helping the parent approach when a child becomes highly distressed and feel urges? Yeah, so this is a great question. So the question here is about, what do we do if that child becomes so distressed and they start to talk about harming themselves? If the parent sets limits on accommodations or they're asked to do ERPs. Of course, I think I just need more information. So things I'm going to be asking about are, you know, can we, it sounds like this is too hard. Can we break this down further? Is there a smaller step that we can take so that it doesn't feel so threatening, so that we can get some traction and momentum and show this child that actually they can ride out this distress and it's not going to hurt them, and then inch towards these harder ones? Or do we need to increase the rewards and make sure there's motivation, there's an incentive there to be doing this hard work? And then, as I was saying, I think it makes sense to always have an emergency plan. We can't just leave parents out there to hope for the best. They need to know what to do if things get really bad and feel supported in that. And again, I would take the time to really explore, even if we have this plan, how likely is it that you're going to implement it? How do you feel about calling 911 or going to the emergency department? So I would say all of those things. Yeah. Okay, my chat box keeps flipping around. Just give me 1 second here.
We have about 3 minutes left, Dr. Bliss.
3 minutes? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak about working with parents who have OCD, whose children also have OCD? Yes, I would love to. This comes back to that really important assessment process where we need to know what we're working with here. So if we know that the child we're working with has contamination fears and we're asking them to do ERPs where, you know, maybe they're bringing their school bag into the house and they weren't doing that previously because it brought in germs or it brought in school related things, and they're game for it, but we find out later that mom isn't because she also has contamination fears and that's too triggering for her, then we need to incorporate that into our plan. It might come back to some psychoeducation, but it might also be referring that parent to their own treatment to make sure that we're working in parallel. Otherwise, you're just not going to be moving forward with these things. Okay, so you provided a quick example during your presentation about parents informing their child of their plan. I'm going to write down a response to OCD instead of saying it. Could you say a little bit more? Yeah, so I didn't get to talk about reassurance seeking, which I really wanted to do. But this is different tools that we have to kind of break that cycle around reassurance seeking. So often the child is asking a question again and again, and the parent and the child are getting into long debates about the answer around that, or the child just needs to, or the parent just needs to say that one more time, or with a little more certainty. So I think 3 things I had on there was, one, you could use something I call reassurance cards. So we'd find a baseline. Let's say the child is asking 20 reassurance questions in a day. Then maybe the child starts with 20 reassurance cards. And every time they ask a question, they have to give a card to the parent. When they're out of questions or out of cards that day, then they're out of questions. The parent's no longer going to respond. Writing it down is a good option for getting out of that debate, that back and forth. So just write it down, and then you can cue that child. I already wrote it down. You can look at my response, or even just point to their response. So it's just messing with OCD a little bit and shaking up that cycle. It's not the end goal. It's just a step towards that.